Hello, and welcome to the second part of this tutorial on freight car anatomy, looking at the structure and parts of railway freight cars. The first part has been uploaded to this channel already, and I encourage you to check out that as well. In part 3, we're going to look at body structures of railway freight cars. These progressed during the decades from wood construction to wood bodies on steel underframes, and then onto all-steel riveted construction, and finally to all-steel welded construction. The various components of freight car body structures are as follows. We have underframes for all types of freight cars, bottom bays and doors for gondolas and hoppers, sides, ends, roofs, and doors for box cars, refrigerator cars, and stock cars, sides and floors for flat cars, sides, ends, and floors for gondola cars, and for tank cars, we will look briefly at saddles and seats, tanks, domes, and manways. Now, regardless of the type of freight car, they all have underframes. The underframe is a framework which receives the buffing and pulling stresses, and it carries the weight of the floor and the body of the freight car. The underframe and the body are rigidly connected, and they mutually stiffen and strengthen one another. The underframe includes all the framing below the floor, and this typically comprises the center and side sills, end platforms possibly, bolsters, cross bears, cross ties, and stringers. In this photograph of a wood chip car on its side, we see a typical underframe arrangement for a car in the 1960s. It has a twin center sill. Many freight cars had twin center sills. We have the cross bears running across the car, the stringers running longitudinally along the car, and then toward either end we see the bolsters with their center plates. An underframe will usually comprise the following components. The center sill is the central longitudinal member which forms the backbone of the underframe. This can be a single member or a pair. It can be straight or fish belly in profile, and typically these were I-beams. Cushion underframes have a floating center sill design to help absorb buffing forces. The side sills are the outside longitudinal members of the underframe. That's also how the body of the car is attached to the underframe. Some cars, such as covered hoppers and tank cars, will have platforms at either end. The bolsters are the major transverse load-carrying member of the underframe. These serve to transmit the loads of the side sills to the center plates, and then of course down onto the trucks. The center plate is one of a pair of plates which supports the car body on the trucks. It is attached to the underside of the bolster, or it might be an integral part of the bolster casting. It rests on the truck center plate, and together these are known as the center bearing. The cross bears are transverse members of the underframe between the bolsters, and these act as a tie between the various sills to help distribute the weight of the car. Now, prior to the introduction of steel underframes, wood or wrought iron underframes were often reinforced with truss rods. These serve to increase the weight carrying capacity of the car. Here we see some truss rods underneath a northern Alberta wood boxcar. This is a steel underframe from a CN or CP boxcar, which illustrates the arrangement of the center sill, the side sills, and the cross bears. The end platforms you see here have been added as this underframe is going to be used for outfit bunk service. Now, tank car underframes were generally an open design with side running boards. In this photograph, the side running board has actually been removed. Over time, these gave way to side personnel guards. Modern tank cars are frameless, with the tank supported on saddles. This car has had the running board removed, as I just mentioned. We then progress up into the body of the car, so let's look at the sides. So we're really talking about box cars, refrigerator cars, and stock cars here. Freight cars progressed from all wood construction to steel frame, and then steel bracing, and then steel roofs, and then steel ends, and finally all steel construction, initially riveted and then later welded construction, which we largely see today. The side sheets were riveted to each other and to vertical posts along the sides and at the corners. During the 1960s, riveted construction began to give way to welded construction. The 1970s saw the introduction of exterior post-welded construction for ease of construction and greater structural integrity. So some of the various side types that we might see, the outside braced boxcar, sometimes known as the Fowler patent car, single or double sheathed cars, riveted or welded sides. Those could be 10 or 12 panels on a 40-foot car, and they could be 12 or 14 panels on a 50-foot car. We also see what are commonly referred to as waffle side cars, where there is some stamping in the side sheets, and this is to try and create some structural rigidity. And then finally, the exterior post designs that we see so commonly today. This diagram shows a typical arrangement of a outside braced single sheathed steel frame boxcar. So this is a boxcar with a steel frame and wood sheathing, and that's supported by outside steel bracing. This was a very common type of car in the early part of the 20th century, and thousands of these types of cars were built in Canada and the United States. And this is what that type of car looks like without the wood sheathing. So this is an outside braced boxcar with the wood sheathing removed and just the steel bracing and the roof remaining. And if the car had its sheathing, it would look something like this. This is a CN outside braced boxcar. It has a steel frame, a steel roof, and steel ends. Note the vertical brake wheel in use at the time. This is an example of a double sheathed boxcar, which has a truss rod underframe, wood sides and ends, and a steel roof. Wood sheathing was also common on early refrigerator cars. This refrigerator car has wood sheathing and it has a steel underframe. Here we see two 40-foot single-door boxcars. The one in upper left has 10-panel riveted sides, and the one at lower right has 12-panel riveted sides. And here are two 50-foot single-door boxcars. The one in upper left has 12 panels, and the one at bottom right has 14 panels. Both cars are of riveted construction. This is a steel refrigerator car, and it has 10-panel riveted sides. In the upper left here, we see 10-panel welded sides on a former Sioux Line boxcar from Pullman Standard. The car is being rebuilt. And in bottom right, we see a 50-foot combination door car, which has 10-panel welded sides. This is an example of those stamped stiffening panels that I referred to earlier. This type of side sheet was often referred to as waffle side construction. It was seen on boxcars and also on some gondolas. And then this is the type of construction we typically see today. The car at upper left has exterior post sides. It's a double-door boxcar. The exterior posts have a hat-shaped configuration. In the car at lower right, which also has exterior post sides, the exterior posts are more of a U shape. We'll now talk about ends of cars on boxcars, refrigerator cars, and stock cars. Steel ends were adopted for these types of cars fairly early on to prevent damage from shifting loads. The ends were assembled from 2 or 3 sheets, which were riveted together. The sheets were stamped with stiffening ribs for structural integrity, and the ends were riveted to the corner posts and to the end side sheets. Some of the different types of ends we might see: in early days, a wood end on a Fowler car, Youngstown or Murphy ends with various rib configurations, dreadnought ends. Pullman Standard had their own type of end, And National Steel Car here in Canada had several different types of ends. And then today we see cars that have non-terminating ends. And this is where the stiffening ribs go all the way to the end of the car. They don't terminate. The corner posts could either be square or they could be curved, and that resulted in sort of a W shape on the inside with the outer sheet curving around it. This is the typical end on a wood boxcar, so you can see that it's got horizontal sheathing and then vertical stiffeners on the outside. Some cars of this type had small square end doors for loading lumber, and yes, that would have been one lumber board at a time. And here we see a wood boxcar with a steel end. This type of end was referred to as a 7/8 end, with 7 ribs in the upper panel and 8 in the lower one. The tack board could be up high or down low. This one has it in the lower position. This is the example of an improved dreadnought end on a former BAR boxcar. There's a stencil there in yellow that says "Caution, no running board," because that's been removed. On this car, you can see that it is made up of 2 panels riveted in the middle, and the ribs have been stamped, and they terminate just before the end of each end of the side, or the end. This is the example of a Pullman standard end on a former Soo Line boxcar. Again, it's assembled from 2 panels. Here we see an NSC2 end on a Canadian National boxcar. This is actually made up of 3 panels. The NSC2 end was distinguished by those vertical stiffeners in between the horizontal ribs, which are sometimes a little difficult to make out, but they are there. And this is the later NSC3 end, which is very similar to the Pullman standard end, but it lacks those little pieces up at the top, the vertical stamped parts. This is a comparison of square and W-shaped corner posts. The car at left clearly has a very square corner to it. You can see the line of vertical rivets on the corner, and those attach the end and the end side sheet to the corner post. And the car right, you can see that the corner is definitely curved, and that's to wrap around the W-shaped corner post. This is an example of a non-terminating end on a boxcar from the 1970s. You can see that it's all welded construction and that the ribs do not terminate. They go all the way out to the sides of the car, and they're also slightly recessed. Let's now talk about roofs for boxcars, refrigerator cars, and stock cars. Steel roofs were adopted for these types of cars to combat against leaks and ruined cargo, which was very common with cars that had wood roofs. The steel roofs were made up of stamped panels, which were riveted together at the stiffeners. The running boards were attached to the roof at each stiffener. As the supports were riveted to the stiffeners, they were generally left in place when running boards were removed. Some of the different types of roofs we might see would be an early wood roof, a Hutchins flat panel roof, a Murphy raised rectangular panel roof, a diagonal panel roof. National Steel Car had a bow tie panel roof, which was very similar to the Pullman standard roof, and there was also a Stanray X panel roof. This is an example of an early steel flat panel roof on a pair of vintage CN boxcars. These roofs were also known as dry lading roofs, as they were seen to be an improvement over earlier wood roofs. This is a Pullman standard roof on a former rail box car. Here you can see that there are bow tie shaped stiffeners going across the car in between the transverse ribs. And this is a National Steel Car roof on a Canadian National car, which was very, very similar in appearance. This is a diagonal panel roof on a Canadian Pacific newsprint boxcar. The diagonal panels were arranged opposite to each other, and there was a pair of them in between each stiffener going across the roof. And this is an example of a Stanray X-panel roof on a modern boxcar. We now come to doors for boxcars, refrigerator cars, and stock cars. Freight car doors take a lot of rough handling, especially following the introduction of forklift trucks, which were used to open and close doors. Forklift push pockets were introduced in the early 1970s in an effort to minimize this type of damage. For dimensional loads, such as lifts of lumber, wider door openings or double doors were soon adopted, as these were seen to be more advantageous for larger loads. Plug doors were prone to falling off cars, and to mitigate this, a third crank arm at the top of the door was eventually required. Some of the different types of doors we might see would be 5-foot wide wood doors on early wood boxcars. Early steel cars had 5-foot corrugated doors. And then later on we see potentially Youngstown steel door, corrugated doors made up of 3 panels with corrugations, and those could be 6, 7, or 8 feet in width. Superior offered horizontal panel doors in widths of 7 or 8 feet. Camel and Youngstown provided 8-foot plug doors, and these eventually grew to widths of 9, 10, and 12 feet. Interior post plug doors appear to be flush to the side of the car, and later exterior post plug doors appear to be recessed in the side of the car. Modern boxcars tend to have free-rolling panel doors, and again these were designed to be opened more easily without damage by a forklift. This is an arrangement of photographs of the different types of doors seen on early boxcars. From left to right, a 5-foot wood door, a 6-foot Youngstown steel door, an 8-foot Youngstown steel door, and an 8-foot Superior door with those horizontal panels. This is an arrangement of plug doors. The one on the left is an interior post plug door. As mentioned, it has a flush appearance to the side of the car. And then in the middle we have the later exterior post plug door, which appears to be recessed. And on the right we have an interior post plug door, a smaller one, on a Canadian steel refrigerator car. And as doors openings got wider and double doors came into view, here's a few examples. At left we see the combination 6-foot plug and 8-foot sliding door with forklift push pockets, and that's so the door can be opened without damaging it by a forklift. In the middle is a modern 12-foot welded sliding door. The width of this door required a reinforced side sill. And on the right is a very similar car to the one at left, except that the main door has been replaced with a free rolling door, and it has a forklift push pocket that extends the entire width of the door. Some cars had bottom bays and doors, specifically gondola cars and hopper cars. So we refer to drop bottom gondolas, which had doors on either side of the center sill. These were at the bottom of the car for quick discharge of the load, so they could fall through the openings in the bottom of the car. These drop doors were generally arranged in pairs, and they could be hinged crosswise to dump between the rails or lengthwise to dump outside the rails. Covered hoppers have doors at the bottom of their hopper bays, and these open to discharge the entire load. They're also known as discharge gates. Open hoppers have doors at the bottom of their slopes, which can open to discharge the entire load, and the doors can be hinged crosswise to dump between the rails or lengthwise to dump outside the rails, such as a ballast hopper. Of interest are the Hart convertible cars, which were designed to be able to dump either inside or outside the rails. At left we see bottom doors on an open hopper car, and at right are bottom doors on a covered hopper. Let's talk now about flat cars, which had sides and floors. They didn't really have ends. Early flat cars were 40 or 41 feet in length, with straight sides, often with fish belly center sills. The introduction of fish belly side sills increased the weight carrying capacity of flat cars. By the 1950s, flat cars were typically 52'6" over end sills. and by the 1960s, they were typically 53'6" over end sills and of welded construction. Minor differences included the profile of the side sill tapers and the number of stake pockets. The 1960s also saw the introduction of 60-foot flat cars for longer or heavier loads. With all of these flat cars, the decking was typically wood for ease of securing cargo. The 1970s saw the introduction of nailable steel flooring. This was made up of steel panels, and nails could be driven in between them. So some variations would be straight side, fish belly side, variations in stake pockets, wood floor, or steel floor. There are, of course, a lot of other flat car types, which I won't get into today. Those include trailer flat cars, bulkhead flat cars, center beam flat cars, log cars, and depressed center flat cars. This is an example of an early flat car from 1914. It has straight side sills and a fish belly underframe. And here's an example of a 52'6" flat car from 1956 with fish belly side sills. It has riveted construction and wood decking, and there is a vertical brake wheel which retracts down to deck height. And this is an example of a 53'6" flat car from 1965. Again, it has fish belly side sills, and it has welded construction and wood decking. Gondola cars had sides, ends, and floors. Early gondolas were typically 40 or 41 feet with straight sides, but like flat cars, they soon grew to 52'6" in length with fish belly sides for greater weight carrying capacity. The fixed ends could be plain, stamped, or ribbed. Drop ends were an option for easier loading of lengthy loads such as pipe or rail. Drop end cars had a brake lever in place of a brake wheel. Wood decking was used up until the 1970s when nailable steel flooring became an option. So for gondolas, we might see straight or fish belly sides and occasionally waffle sides. Gondolas could have fixed or drop ends. Those could be dreadnought ends, plain or ribbed. And again, we can see wood floors, steel floors, or nailable steel floors. This is a 52'6", 70-ton gondola from 1955. It has fish belly side sills and dreadnought ends with a brake wheel at the B end. Note the riveted construction, and the decking inside was wood. And this is an example of a similar car from 1965. It has fish belly side sills and it has ribbed drop ends. So note the riveted construction and also the end brake lever, which is on the left side of that end as you see it there. The decking again was wood. Gondolas could also be longer for transportation of lengthy loads. This is a CP rail example, and it's 65'6" in length. These are sometimes referred to as mill gondolas, and this one was of riveted construction and it had drop ends, and it was built in 1957. We then graduate to 100-ton gondolas. This is an example from 1967. It has welded exterior post fish belly sides, plain fixed ends, a nailable steel floor, and 36-inch wheels. There's a large stencil block toward the left end of the car, which identifies the NSF floor. And here's another example from 1971, which has welded exterior post fish belly sides. This one has ribbed ends, and they're fixed. It has the nailable steel floor and 36-inch wheels. Tank cars are somewhat different, and here we'll talk about seats, tanks, domes, and manways. Tank cars generally fall into two categories. They're either insulated or they're non-insulated. The insulated cars tend to have slightly recessed ends. The tanks were supported on saddles or seats, and these could vary in design according to the manufacturer. The large domes on older cars gradually gave way to smaller manways. These usually have safety platforms or railings surrounding them. Single dome tank cars carried a single product, but there were also dual or triple compartment cars that could carry 2 or 3 different products. for example, shipments of leaded and unleaded gasoline. Today, modern tank cars tend to be frameless, and they are all welded construction. So we might see variations in the saddles and the seats, non-insulated or insulated tanks, and domes or manways. Early tank cars would not have had very much around the dome. They might have had some running boards for people to stand on to access the valves and hatches on top. And then later on, of course, we start to see the various safety platforms. So here is an earlier tank car. It's riveted construction. It is non-insulated. It has a single dome, and there's no platform. There's just a ladder up to the running board on either side. And this is a former UTLX tank car. Again, it's an early one, and it shows typical riveted construction. Here you can see that the ends are riveted to the course of the tank for its main body. Now, what do those domes look like up on top? Well, there would be an access hatch for loading in the product, and there were also two safety valves. These were designed to release excess tank pressure into the atmosphere. And on that same car here we see a safety platform which has been fitted. The platform goes all the way around the dome, and there are ladders up to it from the running boards on either side. This is an example of an insulated frameless tank car of welded construction. It has a single manway, so much smaller than the earlier domes. It has a safety platform. We know this is an insulated car because you can see that the ends are slightly recessed. And we see now the modern trend towards frameless design. And of course, tank cars soon got bigger. This is a dual compartment frameless tank car. It's all welded construction. And because it's divided into two compartments, it has two manways and two vents. We'll now look at safety fittings for railway freight cars. These are very often the detail parts that we are adding to our freight car models, so it's a good idea to know how they should be arranged and where they should go. Sill steps are steps that are suspended from the side of a freight car, and they are located near each end of both sides of the car, and in earlier years they were also located on the ends of cars below the ladders. Those were deemed to be a safety hazard, and railways eventually started to remove those. Grab irons or handholds are made of steel rod. They're similar to a ladder tread, and they have suitable hand clearance. They're placed on the roof of cars equipped with full height ladders, and on each side of all car types above the sill steps, and on each end near the sides of the car. Ladders are made up of vertical bars known as stiles and horizontal crossbars known as ladder rounds, and these were for climbing to or from the car and also to get up to the roof. Crossover platforms came into vogue in the 1960s. They were structures at each end of a car which permit employees to cross safely between cars above the couplers, and they would generally have a crossover handhold positioned above them. Safety railings could be seen on tank cars, around the domes, and on top platforms, and then on modern freight cars we also see them on the end platforms. Another important safety fitting was the running board on top of the car. These were on all box cars, refrigerator cars, and stock cars up until 1966, after which freight cars were built without them, and freight cars which had them started to lose them as they were being refitted. Here we see wood running boards on a pair of vintage CN boxcars. And these are metal running boards on early steel boxcars. They're former CP mini boxcars. Here you can see that on the corner is a corner grab iron. It's sort of L-shaped, and that was to help employees get from the ladder on the side of the car up to the running board. This is the typical arrangement on a wood box car with end and left side grab irons, end and right side ladders. The running board is in place, the brake wheel is in its original high location, and you can see end sill steps that are still in place on this car below the end ladder. This is the typical arrangement on a steel box car from the 1950s. There are end and left side grab irons, and there are end and right side ladders. The running board is in place, the brake wheel is in its original location, and the end sill steps are still in place. And this is a 1950 Zero box car, which has actually a 1947 box car, and this has had some modifications very typical as we get into the 60s and 70s. The running board has been removed, the running board supports have been left in place, the high ladders at the BL corner of the car have been retained to access the high brake wheel. A crossover handhold has been installed at the BL corner of the roof. That's that L-shaped grab iron you see there. The brake wheel and tack board have been left in the high position. The sill step on the end ladder has been removed. And here is the typical arrangement after 1966 for all new freight cars. There's no running board, it has low ladders all around, a low mounted brake wheel, and a low mounted tack board. You can also see a crossover handhold above the brake wheel. This is a 1979 box car with short end ladders, a crossover walkway above the coupler, and a crossover handhold above the ladders. The brake wheel and the tack board are in the low position. This is a typical arrangement on a gondola with grab irons over on the left and ladders at the right and on the end. And here's a steel flat car from the 1950s. It has grab irons on the ends and the sides. The brake wheel is in the retracted position. It can be raised when needed. Now, covered hopper cars required ladders for access to the roof hatches. These had to be opened for loading. This 1981 cylindrical grain hopper has end ladders and it has dual running boards. Basically, the running board goes all the way around the car to access the hatches. And this is a modern pressure flow car. It has ladders for access to the roof hatches. It has end platforms with safety railings, and there are end ladders and top running boards. And this is a modern tank car. It has end platforms and railings. It has side personnel guards. The ladders and full safety platform provide access to the manway on top. It has safety placards, which are coded for 1202, which indicates Class 3 flammable liquids, in this case most likely diesel fuel. We'll finish with a look at research and resources. When researching freight cars that you wish to model, this can be a hobby unto itself. So I'll leave you with a few general thoughts for selecting cars to model or to provide for your layout. Some questions you might ask yourself: which freight cars might have been seen during the era and in the location chosen? What would the ratio of home road to other road freight cars have been? And this will differ from railway to railway. What was the proportional composition of your home road's freight car fleet? This means, what is the ratio among the different types of cars on your railway? And again, that will depend on which railway you're modeling. A really good reference is if you can see photographs that show lots of freight cars in the same area, such as a photograph of a yard. In this example of Dawson Creek, which is where I'm modeling, we see mostly home road cars in the photograph. A few resources to consider when looking to research cars. The official Railway Equipment Register, this lists each railway's freight cars by series and type. So that's very useful, and you can get them for many different eras. Switch lists or car reports will tell you which freight cars were around. Photographs of yards or photographs of trains will suggest which cars were present on the railway during your era. And also, don't forget aerial photographs, which can show you what's going on in a railway yard or an industry. And these are available here in Canada from our various provincial governments, and I'm sure that they're also available in the United States. For modeling specific freight cars, the best resources are builder or railway plans. and also roster photographs. If you can get a hold of builder photographs that were taken as the car was completed, those are very valuable because the car is nice and clean and they were generally taken in good light, and you can really see the car as it was originally built. Many historical societies and museums hold large collections of plans and photographs. And here are some publications which can help you. On the left is the Car and Locomotive Cyclopedia. There are several editions of this. These are readily available on the internet, and they are very useful for learning about freight cars. And on the right is an example of the official railway equipment register that I mentioned. These were published quarterly, and they are also available on the internet quite regularly, and you can also find them in libraries. I wish to thank the following individuals who kindly made their photographs available for inclusion in this presentation. Obviously, a lot of freight car photographs here, so I'm very grateful to these individuals for allowing me to present these photographs. I'd also like to thank the 7th Division PNR NMRA for permission to include several photographs from the William Hewlett collection. Bill was a pioneer PGE modeler. He was our division's first master model railroader, and he bequeathed his models and photographs to our division for people such as me to use. I also wish to thank the Railway Museum of British Columbia up in Squamish for permission to access their site during the winter closure, and I was able to photograph details on many of the freight cars in their collection in time to present this presentation and this video. Well, this concludes our look at freight car anatomy. Again, I encourage you to check out the earlier Part 1 video if you haven't done so. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you have learned something from these two videos. We'll see you again soon.